If you've ever felt invisible to those with power and privilege, if you've ever been dismissed because of your age, gender, or the color of your skin, this story will touch the deepest corners of your heart. Before we begin this journey of hidden connections and unexpected redemption, take a moment to subscribe and share this video. Your support allows us to continue bringing these powerful narratives to light, stories of justice, recognition, and the profound ways our lives intersect across the boundaries others create to divide us. Have you ever experienced that moment when someone finally saw your true worth after dismissing you? Share your experience in the comments below. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the empty stretch of Highway 16, the asphalt shimmering with heat waves that distorted the horizon. 12-year-old Zara Jenkins pedaled her bicycle along the roadside, her dark skin glistening with perspiration as she made her way home from the local library. Most kids her age would be playing video games or watching TV during summer break, but Zara was different. Her backpack was filled with automotive repair manuals and engineering books with colorful sticky notes marking pages of particular interest. Her most prized possession, however, wasn't in her backpack but strapped securely to her bicycle rack, a worn leather toolbox with WJ embossed on its side, filled with wrenches, screwdrivers, and socket sets that had once belonged to her grandfather. The tools were too large for her small hands, but she'd learned to adapt, to find ways to leverage her body weight when strength alone wasn't enough. In Aurora City, a once thriving industrial town now struggling with abandoned factories and increasing gentrification, most people knew Zara as that mechanical genius kid, the little girl who could diagnose engine problems by ear and fix almost anything with moving parts. Her grandfather, William Jenkins, before passing away the previous year, had taught her everything he knew during long afternoons in his workshop. Never let anyone tell you what you can't do because of who you are, he'd told her repeatedly, his work-roughened hands guiding hers as they rebuilt carburetors and replaced timing belts. People will try to put you in a box because you're young, because you're a girl, because you're black. Don't you ever let them. You hear me? Your mind is the most powerful tool you'll ever own. Those words had become Zara's mantra, silently repeated whenever she encountered the surprised looks and dismissive attitudes that often greeted a young black girl who knew her way around an engine better than most adults in the neighborhood. The sound of a struggling engine interrupted Zara's thoughts. Up ahead, a classic Ford Mustang, candy apple red with pristine chrome detailing, sat on the shoulder, hood raised. Even from a distance, Zara recognized it as a 1967 model, one of the most coveted vintage cars among collectors. Her grandfather had shown her pictures of them in his old automotive magazines, explaining their historical significance with the reverence other adults reserved for fine art or historical artifacts. Beside the car stood a man in an expensive charcoal suit that seemed completely out of place in the sweltering heat. His frustration was evident as he paced beside the vehicle, alternating between checking his platinum watch and speaking urgently into his phone. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar to Zara, though she couldn't immediately place why. Then it clicked. Richard Maxwell, according to the business section of the newspaper her mother read each morning with increasing anxiety, was one of the wealthiest property developers in the state. His company, Maxwell Development Group, was known for transforming struggling neighborhoods into luxury developments that original residents could rarely afford to return to. Most recently, his company had purchased the entire eastern section of Aurora City, including Zara's neighborhood, for a massive revitalization project called Aurora Heights. The irony wasn't lost on Zara. Her family had received an eviction notice 3 months earlier, as their rental home of 7 years was scheduled for demolition. Her mother, a nurse working double shifts at the county hospital, had barely managed to find a smaller apartment in a different school district, which meant Zara would be starting 7th grade among strangers in the fall. Zara hesitated, weighing her options. The man standing beside that beautiful car represented everything that was disrupting her life, the faceless force of development that valued property over people. Moreover, adults often dismissed her offers to help, assuming a child, especially a black girl with braided hair and worn jeans, couldn't possibly know anything about automotive repair. But the Mustang called to her. Her grandfather had always said classic cars deserved respect, regardless of who owned them. Machines don't care who you are, he'd told her. They only care how you treat them. The struggling engine of the vintage vehicle sounded like a cry for help to Zara's trained ear. Decision made, she steered her bicycle toward the stranded vehicle. "Excuse me, sir," Zara called out as she approached, setting her bicycle on its kickstand, a respectful distance away. "Is your car having trouble?" Richard Maxwell turned, irritation flashing across his face as he took in the small figure standing before him, a young black girl in denim overalls with colorful beaded braids and a determined expression that seemed at odds with her youth. "Yes, but I've called my mechanic," he replied dismissively, his attention already returning to his phone. "He should be here soon." "Sounds like your fuel pump to me," Zara observed, tilting her head as she listened to the engine's irregular sputtering. "Classic problem with these models, especially in heat like this. I could take a look while you wait if you want." Maxwell lowered his phone, surprise and skepticism battling across his features. His eyes darted from Zara to her bicycle with the attached toolbox, then back to her face. "You know about cars?" "Yes, sir. My grandpa was a mechanic for 40 years before he passed last year. Taught me everything about classics, especially Mustangs." She smiled slightly, remembering her grandfather's words. He always said they were temperamental, but worth the trouble. Maxwell's expression shifted from skepticism to something more complex, a mixture of disbelief and amusement, as though he'd encountered an unusual roadside attraction rather than actual help. "And how old are you exactly?" "12, sir, but I've been working on engines since I was 7. The man seemed to weigh his options, continue waiting for his mechanic, who was at least 30 minutes away according to his frustrated phone conversation, or humor what seemed like an unlikely source of help. The sun continued to beat down mercilessly, and sweat had begun to dampen his expensive shirt, despite his efforts to remain in the narrow strip of shade provided by a nearby tree. "I have an important meeting at the Aurora Heights development site," he finally said, checking his platinum watch again. "The ceremony starts in an hour. I can have you back on the road in 20 minutes, Zara replied confidently, already reaching for her toolbox. "Maybe less if it's exactly what I think it is." Something in her certainty must have convinced him, or perhaps it was simply the lack of better options. Maxwell stepped back from the car with a gesture that said, "Be my guest," while maintaining an expression that clearly communicated his low expectations. Zara approached the engine with reverence, the way her grandfather had taught her. Classic cars deserved respect, not rushed diagnostics or careless handling. The Mustang's engine compartment was immaculate, clearly maintained by someone who understood its value, which made the current problem all the more interesting. She identified the issue immediately. The fuel pump was failing, exactly as she'd suspected from the sound. With practiced movements that belied her young age, she began the temporary repair that would get the car running long enough to reach a proper service station. "Are you really fixing that?" Maxwell asked after watching her work in silence for several minutes, his skepticism giving way to grudging curiosity as her small hands moved with surprising dexterity among the engine components. "Yes, sir. It's not a permanent solution, but it'll get you to your meeting and then to a garage afterward." She carefully bypassed a connection, creating a temporary pathway for the fuel. "My grandpa showed me how to do emergency repairs like this. Said it's important to know how to get yourself out of trouble on the road." Maxwell watched her work, his expression gradually shifting from doubt to amazement as the child demonstrated knowledge that many adult mechanics might envy. Her confidence around the expensive vintage vehicle was remarkable. No hesitation, no second guessing, just methodical precision. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier dismissiveness. "My grandpa's shop, Jenkins Automotive. It was over on Maple Street, before they tore down that whole area for the new shopping plaza. He let me help out after school and on weekends." There was no accusation in her voice, just a statement of fact, though the implications hung in the air between them. The shopping plaza had been one of Maxwell Development's first projects in Aurora City, displacing several small businesses that had served the predominantly black neighborhood for generations. "I remember that shop," Maxwell said quietly, something unreadable crossing his face. "Old building with the blue trim, hand-painted sign." "That's the one," Zara confirmed, tightening a connection with careful precision. "Grandpa had to close down when they wouldn't renew his lease. Said the new rent would be triple what he was paying. He was already sick by then, so he just retired instead." The silence that followed was filled only with the sounds of Zara's tools against metal as she completed the temporary repair. When she finally straightened up, wiping her hands on a rag from her pocket, there was quiet pride in her expression. "Try it now," she instructed. Maxwell reached through the driver's side window and turned the key. The Mustang's engine roared to life, the previous sputtering replaced by the smooth, powerful purr that made these cars legendary. "That's remarkable," he acknowledged, genuine respect coloring his tone for the first time. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing, sir," Zara replied, closing her toolbox. "Grandpa always said knowledge should be shared, not sold." "That doesn't seem right. You just saved me from missing a crucial meeting." Maxwell reached for his wallet, extracting several crisp $100 bills. "Please, I insist." As Zara reluctantly extended her hand to accept the money, her sleeve pulled back slightly, exposing a silver ring on a chain around her wrist. The ring was too large for her small fingers, clearly an adult's ring being worn as a bracelet until she grew into it. Maxwell froze, his gaze fixed on the ring. An unusual design with a small blue sapphire set in tarnished silver, surrounded by an intricate pattern of oak leaves. The casual confidence that had characterized his demeanor evaporated instantly, replaced by a shocked stillness. "Where did you get that ring?" he asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. Zara's free hand moved protectively to the ring, a habitual gesture whenever someone noticed it. "It was my grandpa's. He left it to me when he passed last year." "Your grandfather, what was his full name?" Maxwell asked, an odd urgency in his voice. "William Jenkins, but everyone called him Bill," Zara replied, confused by the man's sudden intensity. "Did you know him?" Maxwell's composed facade cracked, revealing something that looked almost like pain beneath the surface. "Yes," he said quietly, "a very long time ago." He reached inside his shirt collar and pulled out a chain of his own, from which dangled a pendant, a small wooden carving of a Ford Mustang, aged and worn smooth from years of handling. "Your grandfather made this for me when we were boys," Maxwell said, his voice thick with unexpected emotion. "We grew up together in the Parkside housing project before it was demolished." Zara stared at the wooden car, recognition dawning. "Grandpa had a box of those carvings. He said he used to make them for all his friends when he was young." "We were more than friends," Maxwell said softly. "Bill Jenkins was the best friend I ever had. He taught me everything about cars, spent hours explaining engines when everyone else thought I was too small, too skinny to understand. He defended me when the other boys—" He trailed off, lost in memories that seemed to transport him far from the sun-drenched roadside. "What happened?" Zara asked, curiosity overcoming her initial wariness. "Life. My family moved away when my father got a job in another state. This was before cell phones and social media. We lost touch." Maxwell's fingers closed around the wooden Mustang, a gesture that seemed both protective and reverential. "By the time I returned to Aurora City as an adult, everything had changed. I tried to find him once, years ago, but someone told me he'd moved away." "He never left," Zara said simply. "He stayed right here until they closed his shop." The weight of this revelation seemed to physically impact Maxwell, as though the abstract consequences of his business decisions had suddenly taken concrete form before him. The man who had arrived at countless development sites to oversee the demolition of underperforming properties suddenly seemed to see the human cost behind those business decisions with new clarity. "That ring?" he said, gesturing to Zara's wrist. "I gave it to him the day I left. It belonged to my grandmother. Bill had admired it once, and I wanted him to have something to remember me by, a promise that I'd come back someday." Zara touched the ring gently, its significance suddenly magnified. "Grandpa wore it every day of his life. Said it was from someone special who taught him that friendship crosses all boundaries. He said when I was old enough to understand what that truly meant, the ring would be mine. Maxwell's expression transformed as decades of compartmentalized memories crashed through carefully constructed barriers. The developer who had built his fortune on transforming underutilized neighborhoods, predominantly minority communities with limited resources to resist the tide of gentrification, stood face to face with the living legacy of a past he had systematically, if unconsciously, worked to erase. "Your ceremony at Aurora Heights," Zara said quietly. "That's where our house is, or was. We had to move last month when the new development plans were approved. Mom said we couldn't afford to live in the neighborhood once the revitalization was complete." The irony hung between them, impossible to ignore. The man displacing families like Zara's was the same boy who had once found acceptance and friendship with her grandfather, a connection symbolized by the very ring she now wore. "The ceremony," Maxwell said slowly, "it's for the new community center, part of the development's commitment to preserving neighborhood heritage." The corporate language sounded hollow even to his own ears. His phone rang, his assistant, undoubtedly wondering where he was. Maxwell silenced it without answering. "I need to get to that ceremony," he said, decision crystallizing in his eyes, "and I think you should come with me." "Me? Why?" "Because I'm about to make some changes to the development plan, and I'll need someone with a genuine connection to the neighborhood to help guide those changes." As his words hung in the air between them, the full complexity of the situation seemed to unfold around them, like a map being gradually revealed. The initial chance encounter of a stranded motorist and a helpful child had been transformed by the revelation of deeper connections, past friendship, shared history, and the unintended consequences of decisions made at a comfortable distance from their impact. "I don't understand," Zara said, her natural directness cutting through the moment. "What kind of changes?" "The kind that should have been made from the beginning," Maxwell replied, a new resolve settling over his features. "Get your bike. We can put it in the trunk." 40 minutes later, they arrived at the Aurora Heights development site. Construction equipment stood ready to begin demolition of the remaining structures, including the small church where Zara had attended Sunday school and the corner market where her grandfather had played chess with other neighborhood elders on Saturday mornings. The gathering was impressive. Local politicians, investors in expensive suits, reporters with cameras and microphones positioned to capture the ceremonial groundbreaking. A table with architectural renderings displayed the future vision: gleaming high-rises, boutique shopping, and landscaped parks where affordable housing and family-owned businesses currently stood. Maxwell's assistant, a harried-looking woman with a tablet computer, rushed toward them as they exited the car. "Richard, where have you been? Everyone's waiting. The mayor's about to." She stopped abruptly, noticing Zara. "Who's this?" "This is Zara Jenkins," Maxwell replied with a calm authority that brooked no argument. "She'll be joining us on stage." "But the program doesn't. The program has changed," Maxwell interrupted. "Make it work." Confusion rippled through the assembled dignitaries as Maxwell led Zara to the stage where a row of golden shovels stood ready for the ceremonial first dig. Whispers and questioning glances followed them, the incongruity of the powerful developer and the small black girl in worn overalls creating a visual disruption to the carefully orchestrated event. The mayor, already positioned at the podium, leaned toward Maxwell. "Richard, what's going on? Who's the kid?" "A consultant," Maxwell replied simply. "And the reason we're making some adjustments to the plan." Before the mayor could respond, Maxwell stepped to the microphone. The gathered crowd fell silent, cameras focused on the man whose vision was about to transform their city, for better or worse, depending on which side of the economic divide one stood. "Good afternoon," Maxwell began, his voice carrying the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Today marks not just the beginning of a construction project, but an opportunity to redefine what responsible development looks like in communities like Aurora City." He paused, scanning the audience of investors, politicians, and media representatives, then continued with an unexpected pivot. "Many of you know the Aurora Heights project as it was originally conceived, luxury condominiums, upscale retail, and premium office space designed to attract new investment to this area. What you're about to hear represents a significant evolution of that vision, informed by the history and needs of the community that already calls this neighborhood home. Murmurs spread through the audience. Investors exchanged concerned glances. This was not the speech they had expected. "I grew up not far from here," Maxwell continued, surprising those who knew him primarily as a businessman from another part of the state. "In the Parkside housing project before it was demolished to make way for what is now Riverfront Plaza. Back then I was just Ricky Maxwell, a skinny kid obsessed with cars but without access to any. And the person who changed that for me, who showed me that knowledge and passion can transcend boundaries of race or economic status, was a boy named William Jenkins." Maxwell's gaze settled on Zara, standing quietly at the edge of the stage. Bill Jenkins grew up to become one of the finest mechanics in this city, operating Jenkins Automotive on Maple Street for nearly 4 decades. His granddaughter Zara is with us today. Earlier, she did what her grandfather would have done. She stopped to help a stranded motorist, showing the same generosity of spirit and technical expertise that characterized Bill's approach to life. Uncertain applause rippled through the crowd, the audience still trying to understand this unexpected narrative turn. "What Zara doesn't know yet," Maxwell continued, "is that her grandfather saved more than my car when we were kids. He saved me from isolation, from giving up on myself, from the belief that people from different backgrounds couldn't connect in meaningful ways. And I've just learned that while I've been planning to revitalize this neighborhood, I've been unconsciously erasing the very community that helped shape who I am." He gestured toward the architectural renderings displayed nearby. "Effective immediately, the Aurora Heights development plan will undergo the following modifications. 30% of all residential units will be designated as affordable housing, with current neighborhood residents given first option to return at rents comparable to what they're paying now. Local businesses displaced by construction will be offered retail spaces in the new development at subsidized rates. And the centerpiece of the project will no longer be the luxury shopping galleria previously planned, but rather the William Jenkins Technical Academy, a state-of-the-art training facility offering certification programs in automotive technology, construction trades, and other skills that provide pathways to sustainable careers." The announcement sent shockwaves through the audience. Investors huddled in concerned groups. Reporters frantically updated their stories. The mayor, caught between corporate donors and voter interests, struggled to maintain a neutral expression. Maxwell turned to Zara, whose stunned expression reflected her struggle to process this sudden turn of events. "The legacy of your grandfather deserves to be preserved, not just in memory, but in opportunity for the next generation. This neighborhood helped shape who I became, and the least I can do is ensure its transformation doesn't erase the community that made it special." The remainder of the ceremony proceeded with a surreal quality. The planned speeches about property values and investment returns were hastily modified or abandoned entirely. The symbolic groundbreaking, originally meant to represent the beginning of old structures being cleared away for new development, took on a different meaning. The first step in building something that honored rather than erased the existing community's identity. As cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, Maxwell placed a protective hand on Zara's shoulder, guiding her away from the commotion. "Is this real?" she asked when they reached a quiet space away from the crowd. "Or just for the cameras?" The question, direct and unvarnished, reflected the skepticism born of watching previous promises to her community evaporate once media attention moved elsewhere. "It's real," Maxwell assured her. "The investors won't be happy about the reduced profits, but I have controlling interest in the project. They can't stop these changes." "Why?" Zara pressed. "Just because of a ring? Because you knew my grandpa when you were kids?" Maxwell considered her question, recognizing the legitimate suspicion behind it. "Not just because of the ring, though that was what made me see what I'd been missing. It's because your grandfather taught me that real value isn't found in property or possessions, but in community and connection. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that lesson." He reached for the wooden Mustang pendant around his neck. "Bill made this for me 40 years ago, when I told him my family was moving away. I've kept it all this time, but I stopped asking myself why. Today, when I saw that ring on your wrist, everything clicked back into place." Zara studied his face, searching for signs of insincerity. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "Grandpa would have liked the technical school idea. He always said more kids should learn trades, that not everyone needs college, but everyone needs skills." "Your grandfather was a wise man," Maxwell agreed, "and I'd like to hear more about him, if you're willing to share." That conversation marked the beginning of an unlikely partnership that would transform not just the Aurora Heights development, but Maxwell's entire approach to his business. Over the following months, with Zara serving as an unofficial community liaison, the revised project began to take shape as a model of inclusive development, one that viewed existing residents as assets rather than obstacles. The changes weren't without challenges. Several investors withdrew their support, requiring Maxwell to commit more of his personal fortune to the project. Some business partners questioned his judgment or suggested he'd had some kind of midlife crisis. The business press speculated about whether Maxwell Development Group was abandoning its successful formula in favor of risky social experimentation. Yet for every skeptic, there seemed to be a potential partner inspired by the new vision. Corporations seeking to demonstrate social responsibility offered sponsorships for the Technical Academy. Government agencies provided grants for workforce development programs. Architects and urban planners, excited by the opportunity to design truly integrated mixed-income housing, brought innovative ideas to the project. Throughout this evolution, Zara's role grew from symbolic to substantive. Initially invited to planning meetings as a gesture of community inclusion, her practical insights and straightforward questions often cut through corporate jargon to identify potential problems before they materialized. Her perspective as a young resident helped ensure the development would serve future generations, not just current ones. 6 months after their roadside encounter, the William Jenkins Technical Academy held its official groundbreaking. Unlike the generic ceremony originally planned for Aurora Heights, this event centered around the community it aimed to serve. Local residents, former customers of Jenkins Automotive, and students from area schools gathered to witness the beginning of what many hoped would be a new approach to neighborhood development. At the center of the ceremony stood a fully restored 1967 Ford Mustang, candy apple red with pristine chrome detailing, identical to the one that had broken down on Highway 16. Maxwell had located it through a collector's network and purchased it specifically for permanent display in the Academy's entrance hall. This car represents the vehicle that brought two unlikely paths together, Maxwell explained during his remarks. And more importantly, it embodies the passion for mechanical excellence that William Jenkins shared with everyone he encountered, regardless of their background or circumstances. Zara, dressed in a new set of overalls emblazoned with the Academy's logo, stood beside her mother as the ceremonial first shovel of dirt was turned. The sapphire ring, now properly sized to fit her finger, caught the sunlight as she applauded. After the ceremony, Maxwell approached them, carrying a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said to Zara, extending the box, "something that belongs with the ring." Inside lay a collection of letters, their paper yellowed with age, addressed to William Jenkins in a youthful handwriting that had evolved over the years. "I wrote to your grandfather every month for almost 2 years after we moved away," Maxwell explained. "When we lost touch, I assumed he'd stopped caring about our friendship. I never considered that the letters might not have reached him." Zara's mother, Teresa Jenkins, who had maintained a cautious distance from the development project despite her daughter's involvement, spoke up for the first time. "Dad mentioned those letters," she said quietly. "He said they suddenly stopped coming, and he thought you'd forgotten about him once you moved to a better neighborhood." "I never forgot," Maxwell replied, the simple truth carrying the weight of decades. "I just lost my way for a while." Teresa's expression remained guarded, the skepticism of someone who had watched her community repeatedly promised renewal only to experience displacement instead. These changes to the development? They're legally binding, not just promises that can be reversed later. Everything has been documented and filed with the city, Maxwell assured her. The affordable housing, the business incubator spaces, the academy, they're all legally mandated components of the project now. Even if something happened to me, they would continue. Some of the tension left Teresa's shoulders, though the caution in her eyes remained. Generations of broken promises to communities like hers had taught her that words required verification through sustained action. "Mom," Zara said, "Mr. Maxwell offered me an apprenticeship at the academy once it opens. I'd be helping design the youth program while continuing my regular school." Teresa regarded her daughter thoughtfully. Despite her reservations about the developer, she couldn't deny the transformation in Zara over the past months. The girl had always been mechanically gifted, but her involvement with the project had awakened a new sense of possibility, a vision of how her technical skills could benefit not just herself, but her entire community. "We'll discuss it," she finally said, neither accepting nor rejecting the opportunity outright. Maxwell nodded, respecting her caution. "The offer remains open whenever you decide. And Mrs. Jenkins, we still have positions available on the Community Oversight Board if you'd be interested. Your perspective as a healthcare worker would be valuable." The conversation marked not an end point, but a beginning. The start of a careful rebuilding of trust that would require consistent action over time. The legacy of William Jenkins, embodied in both his granddaughter's mechanical aptitude and the sapphire ring she wore, had created an unexpected bridge between worlds that too often remain separated by economics, race, and opportunity. 1 year after the chance roadside encounter between a stranded millionaire and a mechanically gifted black girl, the first phase of the reimagined Aurora Heights development opened to the public. Rather than beginning with luxury components as originally planned, the initial completion included the Technical Academy, affordable housing units, and spaces for returning neighborhood businesses. The William Jenkins Technical Academy quickly established itself as more than just a named tribute. Its curriculum, developed with input from industry partners and community members, offered certification programs that created direct pathways to employment. Students ranged from teenagers seeking alternatives to traditional college tracks, to adults transitioning between careers or returning to the workforce. Most distinctive was the Junior Mechanics program, designed specifically for children, showing early interest in automotive technology. Inspired by Zara's experience with her grandfather, the program paired young people with experienced mentors, providing structured opportunities to develop hands-on skills while emphasizing the broader applications of mechanical knowledge. Zara, now 13, divided her time between regular school, where she excelled in mathematics and science, and her role as student advisor to the Junior Mechanics program. Her mother had ultimately accepted a position on the Community Oversight Board, where her detailed questions and healthcare perspective ensured that development decisions considered impacts on resident well-being beyond mere economics. The relationship between the Jenkins family and Richard Maxwell evolved gradually from wary collaboration to genuine respect. Weekly meetings about the development became monthly dinners where Zara shared stories about her grandfather, helping Maxwell reconnect with memories of his own youth and the formative friendship that had shaped him more than he'd realized. The sapphire ring remained on Zara's finger, no longer just an heirloom, but a symbol of connections that transcended time and circumstance. The wooden Mustang pendant continued to hang around Maxwell's neck, a daily reminder of the values he had temporarily misplaced but found his way back to. Perhaps most significant was the subtle but profound shift in Maxwell Development Group's overall approach to projects beyond Aurora City. The company didn't abandon its profit motive. Development remained a business, not a charity, but its methods evolved to incorporate genuine community input, inclusive housing components, and education or training facilities appropriate to each neighborhood's needs and identity. Industry publications that had initially predicted financial disaster for the revised Aurora Heights project gradually shifted to analyzing its unexpected success. The development's distinctive combination of market rate and affordable housing, educational facilities, and preserved local businesses, created a vibrant, economically diverse community that attracted residents and visitors alike. Other developers began experimenting with similar models, recognizing that inclusive approaches could generate sustainable returns while avoiding the community resistance that increasingly plagued traditional gentrification projects. The William Jenkins Technical Academy became a case study in how educational components could anchor mixed-use developments while providing tangible benefits to existing residents. 5 years after their initial roadside encounter, Zara, now a poised 17-year-old preparing for college engineering programs, stood beside Richard Maxwell at the dedication of the Academy's expansion wing. The facility had outgrown its original space, necessitating additional classrooms and workshop areas to accommodate growing enrollment. "My grandfather believed that knowledge was meant to be shared, not sold," Zara told the assembled audience during her remarks. "He believed that understanding how things work gives you power over your circumstances, but most importantly, he believed that connections between people matter more than any machine." She gestured toward the restored Mustang that still held pride of place in the Academy's entrance hall. "Sometimes it takes a breakdown to create a breakthrough. 5 years ago, a car broke down on Highway 16, creating an unexpected connection that changed not just 2 lives, but an entire community. That's the true legacy my grandfather left behind. Not just mechanical knowledge, but the understanding that when we recognize our shared humanity across all the boundaries others create to divide us, we build something more valuable than any development project." As Zara concluded her remarks, the sapphire ring caught the light, its blue stone gleaming against her skin, a small object that had bridged decades, reconnected lost friendship, and ultimately begun to transform how one man wielded his power and privilege. The ring that had once symbolized a childhood promise now represented a different kind of commitment to development that preserved rather than erased, that included rather than displaced, that valued human connection alongside economic progress. The story of the ring, the Mustang, and the unlikely partnership between a developer and a mechanically gifted girl gradually spread beyond Aurora City, inspiring other communities to demand more inclusive approaches to urban renewal. It became a case study in business schools examining corporate social responsibility and in urban planning programs exploring alternatives to traditional gentrification models. For Zara Jenkins, preparing to become the first in her family to attend college, the ring remained her most treasured possession, a connection to her grandfather, a reminder of her own capabilities, and a symbol of how recognition, when it finally comes, can transform not just individual lives but entire communities. For Richard Maxwell, the wooden Mustang pendant continued its decades-long journey against his chest, no longer a hidden reminder of childhood, but a public symbol of the values now explicitly incorporated into his company's mission statement: connection, community, and development, that honored rather than erased the human elements of the neighborhoods where they built. And at the William Jenkins Technical Academy, generations of students, many from backgrounds similar to Zara's, learned not just mechanical skills, but the more profound lesson embedded in the story behind the institution: that sometimes the smallest objects carry the weightiest histories, and that true value lies not in property or possessions, but in our willingness to truly see each other across the divisions we create. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more narratives that reveal how unexpected connections can bridge divides and create meaningful change. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone finally recognized your true worth after initially dismissing you? Or have you discovered an object that linked you to a forgotten piece of your past? Share your experience in the comments below.